2024 has definitely been a transitional year with a huge influx of young drivers either making their debuts or securing seats on the grid for 2025. With the announcement that Valtteri Bottas will be replaced by Gabriel Bortoleto at Sauber for 25, it signals almost a complete end to what I have coined in the past as the in-between generation of drivers who made their debuts between 2010 and 2014. Apart from Nico Hülkenberg, we have known for a while that Kevin Magnussen was most likely in his final season of Formula 1, Daniel Ricciardo was rather awkwardly retired mid-season, Bottas is now out as well, although we'll see if he'll be able to make a comeback for 26, and even Sergio Perez despite having a contract, with Lawson now in the frame and Red Bull most likely to finish down in third in the Constructors' Championship, basically entirely down to Checo underperforming. There is still the chance that even he sees the end of his Formula 1 career at the end of this season as well. And now, this is totally normal in Formula 1 and in fact in all sports, because Father Time is undefeated. In F1, we usually go through cycles every 5 or so years, and especially when driver contracts line up and come to an end. There's usually a batch of young drivers that find themselves in the right place and at the right time, with 2019 being the last year with 3 new rookies joining Formula 1 in Russell, Norris and Albon. In the exact same way as next year, we're going to have Antonelli, Doohan and Bortoleto making their debuts. However, what's made this year a lot different is that due to various circumstances, we have also seen a lot of young drivers be called up mid-season, and almost all of them have justified that faith in young drivers and delivered under less than ideal circumstances. This year we have had drivers be dropped mid-season, miss races due to illness or surgery, and also a driver having to miss a race due to serving a race ban. Now, it's not uncommon for one of these things to happen during a season, but for all of them to happen during one season, and sometimes even more than once, just emphasizes what a crazy year 2024 has been. These circumstances, which come at the cost of established drivers, present opportunities for younger drivers, which is what makes 2024 such an outlier. Generally speaking, it's been more and more difficult for younger drivers to break into Formula 1 or even just to be given mileage in Formula 1 cars, because as F1 has moved into a cost cap era where track time has become more and more limited, that comes at the cost of younger drivers being given less and less opportunities. To counteract this, F1 has tried to help young drivers by introducing the FP1 Young Driver Rule, and even trying unsuccessfully so far to create an all-rookie race at the end of the season. However, just by chance this year has presented plenty of opportunities for young drivers, and not only have we seen those drivers capitalize on those opportunities, but I think it's also changed the decision making of the other teams off the back of how well those drivers have performed. Ollie Behrman is probably the best example of this, in that whilst he was already on Haas's radar after impressing in his debut Formula 2 season and FP1 outing for them last year, becoming the only driver in Formula 1 history to score back-to-back points in his first 2 races with 2 different teams pretty much summarizes just how talented of a driver he is. After Ollie's incredible F1 debut with Ferrari finishing 7th around a very tricky track in Jeddah in place of Carlos Sainz, it was almost guaranteed that he'd be signed up full-time by Haas, but it really felt that that was the launching point for the other teams to start putting more faith and trust in giving their young drivers a chance as well. And next up, it was Williams who stepped into the fold. With the Logan Sargeant situation becoming untenable, it was inevitable that he was going to be dropped, but the choice of who should replace him became a big topic of debate. Williams had plenty of experienced options that were available, but in the end decided to go with yet another Williams Academy driver in Franco Colapinto. And now, I remember at the time there was a lot of fans that were quite critical of James Vowles for choosing to go with yet another rookie to replace Logan Sargeant, but for the most part it was because people had never actually seen Franco Colapinto, and they also didn't understand the logic in replacing an inexperienced driver with an even less experienced driver. In the end, Franco Colapinto I think has been the surprise of the season. In only 2 races he contributed more points to Williams than Sargeant has done in 2 years, and he even had James Vowles negotiate on his behalf to potentially get him into the Sauber for 2025. And now, don't get me wrong, he is very much still rough around the edges and has also had his fair share of crashes, but he was yet more proof that youth and inexperience isn't as detrimental as people think it is, and when you do give these drivers an opportunity and platform to show what they can do, most of them look even more competent in Formula 1 than plenty of already established drivers purely through how determined they are to get into Formula 1. The last of the young drivers who got to race this season is Liam Lawson. Now, Lawson made his F1 debut last year, so he's someone who we were already quite familiar with, but the circumstances and pressure around his return was definitely unique. Unlike with Bearman and Colapinto, Lawson returned to Formula 1 with real expectations because of who he replaced, the way he replaced him, and the reason why he was chosen to replace him. Lawson has essentially been brought back to put pressure on Sergio Perez with the possibility of stepping up into the Red Bull for 2025. It marks a shift in Red Bull's philosophy back towards young drivers after choosing to keep Checo and choosing to bring back Ricciardo. And I think you have to include Lawson's return as yet another example of teams choosing to put faith in young drivers. Due to the success of these young drivers on track, I genuinely believe that it had a major role to play in the fact that off track, 3 rookies have now been signed for next season. If you believe what Toto Wolff says, then Kimi Antonelli was nailed on to go to Mercedes the moment that Hamilton announced his move to Ferrari, but when it comes to Sauber choosing Bortoleto and then especially Alpine choosing to go with Jack Doohan, I am not sure that both of those drivers would have been signed had those teams not seen the success that the other teams were having in giving their young drivers an opportunity. Alpine to me is probably the team that signifies this 2024 young driver revolution the best, because historically, whilst the Alpine/Renault Driver Academy has injected a huge amount of money into giving young drivers a platform in the junior formula, or when it comes to then actually promoting those drivers into Formula 1 into their own team, they have been historically bad. Believe it or not, in the Renault/Alpine era, Jack Doohan is the first ever junior to be promoted by them into Formula 1. That to me is still absolutely crazy because there is loads of drivers on the grid who at one point or another in their careers were part of the Renault Driver Academy, with Ocon, Zhou and Piastri all being prime examples, but they were then all promoted and raced in Formula 1 by other Formula 1 teams. Alpine has always been very cautious and almost resistant to promoting young drivers. I mean, they literally had Piastri waiting to be given a contract and completely fumbled the bag, as we all know, and historically, they have always instead preferred to sign experienced and accomplished drivers like Nico Hülkenberg, Daniel Ricciardo, Fernando Alonso and Pierre Gasly, which in their eyes gave the team more legitimacy as a top team. There's no doubt that just like Williams, Alpine also had plenty of experienced options who could have replaced Esteban Ocon, like Valtteri Bottas and even Mick Schumacher. But seeing teams like Mercedes prepare to sign Antonelli, seeing what Haas's young talent in Bearman was doing in a Ferrari, and all of the other teams start to consider young drivers in favour of the old guard, I think Alpine also got swept up in that wave as well, and it was just enough to tip the scale to the point where finally they had enough faith to promote Jack Doohan. Something that I think is worth mentioning is the role that Formula 2 has played this year, or maybe the lack of. With a brand new generation of cars and a whole load of new drivers, this season in F2 has been even more of a madness compared to Formula 1 because almost every single driver has won a race this season. Overall, this has made it even more difficult to judge drivers, and it's actually been a source of heavy criticism from the fans. Or when you look at the drivers that are either already or will be in Formula 1 that have raced in F2 this year, Kimi Antonelli is currently 6th in the championship, Colapinto, who stopped racing a couple of rounds ago, is in 7th, and Ollie Bearman is down in 15th. The truth is that Formula 2 has lost a lot of its relevance when it comes to being the benchmark for F1-worthy drivers because the priority this season has been entirely on how these drivers have looked in F1 machinery. Bearman impressed so much in Formula 1 that his F2 season basically became irrelevant no matter how low he ends up finishing in the standings. Isaac Hadjar, a driver who has been fighting for the title for the entirety of the season, apparently underwhelmed during his FP1 outing with Red Bull and hasn't really been considered for a seat at RB. And then you have another end of the extreme in Bortoleto, who hasn't even done an FP1 outing, but is currently leading the F2 Championship as the reigning Formula 3 champion and has now been signed to race for Sauber in 2025. Formula 1 teams in general, I think, can be very cautious, and a lot of the fans, from what I have seen, can also be very dismissive of young drivers who aren't either leading the championship or don't have a huge amount of hype surrounding them. Throughout the Formula 2 grid, and I'm talking about drivers like Paul Aron, Victor Martins, and lots of others, I genuinely believe could be really good Formula 1 drivers and would even surprise a lot of the fans were they to be given the chance in the same way that Franco Colapinto was this season. As I said, 2024 is a moment in time. It's another special year in that cycle where circumstance and opportunity align to give loads of young drivers a platform to show what they can do, and it opened the door for other teams to have more faith in their young drivers as well. The new generation coming into the sport next season is going to be one of the biggest talking points of 2025 because chances are one of them, if not a few of them, might turn out to be special enough to become world champions. That can only happen if teams are brave enough to give inexperience and determination a chance. And 2024 I think will go down as a lesson in why Formula 1 should never stop giving young drivers a platform, even with the risk of failure that's always going to be there. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.